most popular question about parenting is, am I a good parent?
And I've worked with over 1,000 parents.
I don't like the misinformation.
If you are worried that you are not good enough, it means that you care. Connection is at the key of all of this.
What's the hardest truth about parenting that no one wants to hear?
I think one of the hardest truths about parenting is
Emily Hughes is an expert parenting coach who helps high-functioning parents stay calm under pressure, set boundaries without shouting, and lead their families with steady, confident authority.
there's some really amazing evidence on the outcomes for kids who were emotion coached. They are more successful in every metric of life success. Often in parenting, we are getting stuck in short-term gain for long-term pain. One of the first questions I ask when I meet parents is, what is your long-term vision? Young children are primed for survival. As parents, we need to be modeling the behavior we wish to see in our children. There's no mastery in parenting. I see parenting as the ultimate portal for personal growth. Boundaryless parenting, it serves nobody. Growth involves suffering.
Teenagers need to be more controlled.
The thing that I really think teenagers need is media literacy.
If you gave them that phone, they'd be gone. You'd never see them again.
Yeah, we live in a non-optimal society. You should be the primary source of influence for your child.
Okay, we're doing something a little bit different today. We're going into the parenting zone. How to be a good parent. And lots of people watching are parents, some very young and some grandparents even. And we don't always get it right. And there's a lot of confusing information out there about parenting. And then parenting also affects our professional lives. You know, it's all intertwined. So it's highly relevant. And what I always love to do is bring in the experts. I don't like the fake information, the misinformation. I want the true experts in. And that's why you're here, Emily. So for those that don't know you, tell our viewers who you are and why you are truly a parenting expert.
So, yeah, I'm a conscious parenting coach, and I've worked with over 1,000 parents across my coaching and through my courses to really help parents to get to what matters most. And I spent 10 years as a secondary school teacher before embarking on this. And what interested me most about that was how you get to raise great kids. And throughout my experience as a teacher and then training as a coach and also training in somatic work, so of the body, because we all know parenting is both a mind and body experience.
Okay. That's a crazy way to think about it, but it is a mind and body experience. Anyone who's a parent will know exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, so you are, you're certified, you're trained, you've spoken to thousands of parents. Yeah. And you've worked with kids in a teaching setting, so you know a thing or two about the little terrors, the cuties, the little cutie pies. So, in preparation for this podcast, I asked ChatGPT what the most popular question was that parents are asking on Google. So, what is the frequently most typed question that parents asked? Do you know what it was? Am I a good parent?
Yeah. Yep, and I think this speaks to doubt, which is such a common feeling in parenting. And I think that it's really interesting in my coaching work that the limiting belief that comes up so much in parenting is I'm not good enough. And often that's lurking in the shadows underneath our parenting. And really what I think parents need to understand is that parenting is not school. This is not something that you pass or fail at, that there's an exam at. This is a long journey. And there is always time to reconnect, to change the dynamic. It's never too late. And when we're in that mindset, which is more of a growth mindset, because this kind of idea that we might be failing, it's a very fixed mindset way of looking at parenting, but really being abundant, that we have enough time. And one of the things that I'm always leaning my clients towards is leaning into their capability. So it's not about good or bad. It's about being capable. And when you feel capable, so much begins to be possible. So yeah, focusing less on the moral judgment and leaning into your capability and also your commitment to your child. Because if you are worried that you are not good enough, it means that you care. And caring, aligning that with kind of your integrity, that's what will actually help you to thrive as a parent.
I mean, if we do step into that sort of the doubt field and just massage that for a second, because it's a very real thing for parents. I've heard a lot of parents say that if my kids are still speaking to me, you know, want to hang out with me when they're older and they don't need to, you know, then that's successful parenting.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's definitely something that people say. And yeah, I agree. It really is about the metrics that you are judging your parenting against. And I always say that, you know, connection is at the key of all of this. And if you are building connected relationships with your children and those connected relationships last, then I would define that as being
What
success.
do you mean by connected? Do you mean we communicate and we understand each other? What is the connection?
Yeah, I think it's communication, it's understanding, and it's something more soulful, I think. So one of my clients said to me, which I really, really loved, she said she'd been focusing a lot on her child's academic success, but she had been neglecting the more kind of soulful attunement. And what I mean by attunement, how I describe that, is it's a bit like two people playing piano together. And if you are attuned to your child is playing their piece and you are doing a harmonious duet with them. But if you are misattuned to your child is playing their tune and you're coming in kind of, and that is the kind of misattunement. And every child is different and playing a different tune. And part of our journey as parents, I believe, is to attune to that tune and to gently guide that into maturity and adulthood.
You know, you actually see it quite a lot in the academic schools, you know, the grammar schools and the ones where they put a lot of pressure on, that these kids are drowning in academics. You have that, okay, there's extremes where they're probably not doing enough work in some schools, and then the other ones are they're pushing you a lot, and then they are. But then, yes, there's this neglect on the emotional upbringing, which is such an important part. You know, what happened at school today, how is that friend of yours, or how's that person that's not been that nice? What's the latest, juice on that or whatever, and just sort of tapping into their day emotionally, how they've navigated it. It's quite a
So what you're speaking on there is kind of emotion coaching.
Yeah.
And there's some really amazing evidence on the outcomes for kids who were emotion coached, who had parents who were interested in the child's emotional world. And those children, who are emotion coached, they are more successful in every metric of life success. So they're more successful academically, socially, even health. And really, this is at the core of everything. It's like, how are we raising emotionally intelligent kids? But in order to do that, we sometimes need to raise our own emotional intelligence. That's certainly my journey in parenting. I thought I was emotionally intelligent, and I swiftly realized in my first few years of parenting that I was not emotionally intelligent. And that's been like a big quest for me.
A toddler's going to test you.
Exactly.
Toddlers are the most, you're the strictest thing about clients. You talk about a toddler's demanding. They have no patience with you. And any nonsense baggage you might be carrying. That, a toddler is a special species, I would say. What's the hardest truth about parenting that no one wants to hear?
I think one of the hardest truths about parenting is really around control. Because so often in our lives, from when we became an adult to when we had kids, we are largely in control of our lives. Then children come along. And the truth is that you cannot fully control a child, because you can't make a child sleep. You can't make a child eat, and you can't make a child defecate, right? And it can be a massive challenge to our need for control. And really one of the greatest things that we can accept is that humans are really hardwired to not be easily controlled. And when we accept that control is not the goal, but guiding and finding ways to attune and gain cooperation, it's possible to do this. But when we are stuck in feeling like I need to control everything because I'm not safe unless I'm controlling everything, that's where people get stuck in
You're making me
parenting.
think of the Super Nanny episodes. I don't know if the viewers are going to recognize or remember Super Nanny. But yeah, when she goes around and then she's trying to... Well, the toddler's actually trying to control the household normally, and the toddler's making the rules about when it goes to bed. Normally, it's these really like strong, empowered toddlers that really want to rule the show. That's what makes good TV, right? You've got the toddler who's trying to control the household, and then you've got this desperate parent who can't control the toddler, and the Super Nanny comes in, and she then controls the parent and the toddler, and she does this whole naughty step thing. And in a way, I feel like the toddler's temporarily controlled, and then she goes, and then it's all
Yeah. And one of the things I think about the Super Nanny approach is I don't think it's very wise.
Why is it not wise?
Because it's
Super
really
Nanny is not wise.
It's really rooted in disconnection. And any parenting approach that is rooted in disconnection, so sending the child away, that's not really gaining the long-term vision that you want for your family. Because whenever I speak to, one of the first questions I ask when I meet parents is, what is your long-term vision? Because this is the thing. So often in parenting, we are getting stuck in short-term gain for long-term pain. But really, when we think about what we truly want for our child's life, I believe that we all really deeply at our core want to raise wise elders. Now, that might sound a bit funny if you've got listening to this and you've got a 4-year-old at home, but I think that is really the end
elder.
point.
It's good.
That's really the end point, is to raise
elders.
a wise elder, right? And if you are doing that through disconnection, through blame, shame, punishment, the child is not learning how to be wise. And so I think the parent's role through connection is to be the wise guide, the wise teacher, because the truth is, if your child develops emotional intelligence, parenting's going to be so much easier for you.
But you sometimes hear parents, and parents lose it, don't they, when they get really frustrated with their kids and they'll shout at them, and you sort of think, but when you're 3, you're not going to understand what the shouting message is, are you? Can a 3-year-old understand shouting?
I think one of the things here is, as parents, we need to be modeling the behavior we wish to see in our children. And when we model high reactivity and being out of control, it's not really effective. Now, I'm a realist. I think, it's the way that most of us have been parented. It's almost impossible to parent without occasionally shouting. I'm not going to, claim that that's an easy thing to do. But I think if we commit to begin again, every time we shout, we're not going to get lost in the guilt and shame of the fact that we've shouted. We just commit to begin again and try to do better. And I think, one of the things about young children are primed for survival. And how do they survive? Well, they survive by getting our attention, and they survive by getting our high energy. And if you are shouting at a child, of course, it's not nice, but for a child's perspective, they're like, I'm getting attention and I'm getting high source of energy from you. And for a child, that means survival. And the child's not sophisticated enough yet to be able to get that kind of high input energy in a healthier way.
I suppose what I'm asking, it's maybe not the occasional shout. Okay, some shout too much, but it's more as they go through the levels. And I mean, this is now I'm speaking just as I don't have parent coaching or anything, but I'm a parent of 3 girls who are now teenagers. My oldest is 18, 16 and 14. And I found that at every stage, you would have to communicate with them a little bit differently. I mean, I think there would be zero point in shouting at it. You can't shout at a baby. You can't shout at a 3-year-old. What are you going to what are you going to shout? They don't understand what you're talking about. You know, so it's almost like you have to, like, you evolve with them and your communication changes, and they can only understand certain things at certain ages. You know, if they can't work out a complicated maths formula, you're whatever yelling, they're not going to really comprehend that either. So it's like you can't even do that even if you wanted to. But it's almost like you develop with them as they grow, and you give them what they can handle. Is that
100%?
What you,
yeah. And I believe that, you know, there's no mastery in parenting, because as soon as you feel like you've mastered parenting, as you've described, your child goes through another developmental milestone. They change. They offer you fresh material all of the time.
Fresh content.
Fresh content.
It never ends.
And this is really why you mentioned growth there. I see parenting as the ultimate portal for personal growth, the ultimate portal, because your child is giving you many potential triggers.
Oh yeah.
And each of those triggers, you have the choice as to what to do with them. And this is why. So each trigger that your child gives you, we could look at it as being a gift. Now, I know that might seem like a little bit of a stretch, but it's a gift to understand yourself more deeply and to really understand what it is to be a human as well, because humans are emotionally messy and complicated, and parenting is the most emotionally complex thing you are ever likely to do. And
this is true.
Embracing that as a journey of growth and a chance to understand yourself, your children, and what it means to be alive as a human.
Tell that to the parents who have crayon all over their house and a mess. I mean, you've got to feel for parents sometimes, because some kids, you know, and there's different levels, I suppose, of madness. But, you know, these parents, they work so hard, you know, as well. And they come back exhausted. And sometimes the kids, it is hard work. It's definitely a challenge to be a good parent, I think, for everyone.
Yeah. And I think within that, one of the things that I think we need to get very clear-eyed on is the fact that we have all been sold a lie. And the biggest lie is that the nuclear family is normal. The nuclear family is not normal. If you look at the history of humans as a species, it's something like 2% of all humans have been operating within the nuclear family. And the other 98% were in tight, close-knit communities, intergenerational families living together, or tribes. And
so by nuclear family, you mean the mum and dad and then the siblings, just the small unit. You're not talking about the great-grandparents and then the small community unit that would support you.
The people who live in your house. Yeah.
Basic, okay.
Yeah. And when they study hunter-gatherer parents, you know, in tribes that are still existing today, up to 14 adults are responsible for each child's care. True. And this idea that we are meant to be thriving, parenting mainly by ourselves, is unrealistic. And the more that we can embrace that, and really, one of the things I tell my clients is one of the challenges of modern day parenting is to thrive within the non-optimal situation that we find ourselves in, and to embrace the fact that it is non-optimal. We're meant to be parenting with support from many other adults, and we don't have that, and that is why it's so hard.
Sometimes you don't want that support because you've got different parenting styles.
That's
so, you've got the classic, like mother-in-law. I'm lucky with my mother-in-law, but sometimes you might have, one that's, parenting in a way that you think, oh my goodness, or you're handing them sweets or maybe, whatever it might be, but you have differences and that can cause friction. Because parenting is a touchy subject.
It is a very touchy subject.
Parents get upset.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the hard things about parenting in Britain is that there's so much choice on how you could parent.
Gosh.
And, in other cultures around the world, the community is the third parent. And we don't have that because everybody's parenting in a very different way. And often parents are watching each other.
Yeah.
Because part of why we're watching each other is to be like, well, what are they doing? should I be doing that? And this creates this environment where shame thrives. Because when we feel like people are watching us, and when we feel like we are not supported by community, and that perhaps we might be getting it wrong, shame thrives. And I think that shame is what is lurking under so much parental reactivity. And parents can find it, well, humans can find it so hard to identify the emotion that I am feeling is shame. Because even talking about shame, people want to lean away from shame. But it is the powerful driving force underneath so much of our reactivity.
I mean, when you talk about this, I have about a million different thoughts, but I'll categorize it into two. The one half of my brain will sympathize and think, oh, it's horrible to be, judged, and you should parent the way that your instincts tell you, because normally your gut instinct is correct, and you should trust that. And what works in one culture might not work in another culture, and you should just really trust that and have faith in yourself and go for it. And then the other part of my brain is, but what about when you see these things and you see someone's toddler going crazy and publicly and just misbehaving and being completely rude to the parents? You think, why aren't you parenting? And then you are yourself being this judgy person. And it's like an instinctive thing. But also on LBC the other day, I was driving and I put it on, and there was an argument. Honestly, it was so passionate, this conversation about kiddies being allowed into nursery school. You talk about 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds in nappies. And some of the callers were calling in and getting really upset, and saying that it's horrible, lazy parenting. And why is this happening? And again, you sort of feel on the one hand, well, there must be a reason why, maybe they've had difficulty and maybe the finances aren't in order. You don't know what happened. Maybe they're very ill. You just don't know. Right. But then on the other hand, you sort of think, but yes, why is your child not out of nappies at that age? And you can't help but be judgy. I mean, it's a horrible, muddy thing to step into, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think part of this, again, leans into a more societal problem, that we don't support parents and that we actually devalue parenting as a society. From the get-go, we devalue parenting as a society. You can see that through paternity leave, maternity,
It's like go, don't worry about being a parent, even though that is your most important job. If you decide to have this child, that's your priority.
And you see that in the way that money has been taken from support services for years, and so part of this is at a societal level where I think parents are not supported. And I think another thing that has happened,
it's a good point,
is that we as a society, we are, as a generation of parents, unlike perhaps our parents' generation, we've grown up aware of the impact that parenting can have on children through the sort of mass popularization of psychology, through the media, through culture. And we're also a much more trauma-informed society. Now, what this can end up doing for some parents is that they are so worried about causing harm to their child that actually they are unable to set boundaries. Because in order to set a boundary, the child needs to undergo a small amount of suffering. Because it is hard for a child to meet a boundary. That's just hard. Children are not going to like your boundaries. But what can end up happening, and I would say that I would relabel that lazy parenting to being boundaryless parenting. And the thing is with boundaryless parenting is that it serves nobody. It doesn't serve the child and it doesn't serve the parent. And again, it's short-term gain for long-term pain.
Long-term pain.
Yeah.
All those nappies as well.
The environmental impact. And really, I think what this is parents needing more trust that you can set boundaries. Within that boundary, the child will experience a small amount of suffering, right? And your role is to support the child through that suffering, not to eliminate suffering, because that's not how life works, but to support the child through that. And really that is where we can find more progress and more peace in our parenting.
Helping each other. I think helping each other as parents, if you know, gently, you know, if someone needs it, you can sort of say, well, I'm available to do this and that. If you just helping each other, I think that's quite a cool thing to do, especially when you know each other, you're all in the same, you know, your kids are friends, you might as well, you know, if you can help someone, that's good. And also being prepared to suffer ourselves, because I think the inconvenience of having to go everywhere with a potty and have to, you know, get them up and sit with them and wait, and it's all that inconvenience that we just have to also inconvenience ourselves.
100%.
Get used to it.
Yeah. It's like, how can we feel more safe in suffering? Because growth involves suffering.
Pain.
It does. And, you know, there's a nice analogy of the soft shell crab. Have you ever heard this one?
No, go on.
So the soft shell crab, in order to grow, the crab needs to shed its old hard shell, which is a painful process. And then it goes through this sort of vulnerable process where its shell is soft. And then as it's developing and growing, that shell becomes harder, more sturdy, more resilient, more robust. But then it gets to another point where the inside of the crab is starting to outgrow the shell. And again, it goes through this more vulnerable process of shedding the old shell, having the more vulnerable soft shell. And that is what parenting is like. It's this suffering, vulnerability, but how we help our child through that is through empathy. And that's the key thing when we're setting boundaries. What will help us to set boundaries is empathy. I'm setting this boundary because it is for your good, for your long-term good, but I see this is hard for you.
Yeah, it's empathy. Hard to be empathetic with a screaming toddler. But you need to have that sensitivity to them.
And I really think empathy sets you free as well. Empathy is not just a gift for the child, it's a gift for yourself. Because when you're showing up in empathy for the child, you simply, by default, are more empathetic with yourself.
Why do kids, or why can kids, why are they able to, I mean, do they have some sort of innate ability to wind their parents up sometimes? Like, you know, a toddler just saying no, the toddler's just like no, or teenager or whatever. Is it because they know us, they know what buttons to push, and they are emotionally intelligent and they know our parenting defects? Like, why do kids get to their parents in that way? Even like really top tier CEOs, they'll crumble, you know, where their kids can floor them, you know.
Yeah.
Humble them.
For the majority of the time, I think that labeling our children's behavior as them trying to manipulate us is not helpful. Because most of the time what it is a child with an unsophisticated brain that's not fully developed yet, trying to get their needs met in the only way they know how. And if that is triggering us, if that is pushing our buttons, it is because it is poking at some unhealed wound within us, or some limiting belief that we're not good enough, or that we're not heard, or that we don't matter.
Okay, I'll take this a step further. So what if, and this happens because I've spoken to a lot of parents, and I've had an experience with this myself, where you'll have the children who will play parents off against each other. So they'll say, can I do this? And say, well, no, because we don't do that. And they'll say, well, dad said I can do it. And dad would say yes, and da-da-da. And then they'll go to dad and they'll be like, well, mum said no, and it's not, you know, they'll sort of play the parents. Or they'll say things like, oh, well, you did it for so-and-so, I'm not the favorite then if you're not doing it for me. Clever. I don't know. That's why I say manipulative, because that is what an adult would call manipulation, because you're playing people. And they're smart kids.
Yeah. So what you've done there is a tool that I use in my coaching called Finding the Jewel. And when you find the jewel in your child's behavior, you are able to show up with less reactivity. So what you did there was find the jewel in the behavior, which
What's
is
the jewel?
The jewel is that's clever. That's intelligent behavior, right? And if you are able to find the jewel, now that doesn't mean you condone the behavior, but if you are able to find the jewel in it and go, I see what you're doing,
smart.
then you are able to stay more grounded in your response.
Definitely.
Whereas if you are reacting to that, you've gone down to the level of a child, right? And, you know, I think that there's something deeper at play here within that. If the child knows that they can do that, then that speaks to something that has not happened within the two parents, which is to find alignment on their values. Now, you do not need to parent exactly the same as your partner, but where you do need to, what you might need to work on is having alignment over your values. And what I mean by your values is what you deem to be deeply important. And if you and your partner have a shared understanding of what you deem to be deeply important, then you are going to be far less easy to play off against each other.
You see, they know that because when it comes to sweets, for example, I don't like sweets. I don't want them in the house. I don't want to hear it from the dentist. So, have they been eating sweets? And it's like, I don't buy them. My husband buys the sweets, brings them in the house, puts them in the cupboard, and then they go, and then dad's bought the sweets. You know, and it is one of those things, but dad likes the sweets and he wants the sweets and he doesn't see it as a big problem that they have the occasional sweet. I don't like the sweet. I don't want it in the house. I think if it's in the house, they're tempted. So on that, no, we're not aligned. You're spot on. Never have been on sweets.
And you know, it might point there to perhaps the dad has more of a value on like freedom, and 100%. And you have more of a value, 100. Perhaps it's health. And
teeth.
And when those two values are coming into conflict, that's really where sort of a dysfunction lies.
But you know, so if I may, I also find it's good though. I find that it's good when it's, especially as they get older, into teenagers, whether there is a need to open up that freedom a bit more because you have to develop and you have to learn to be free. I mean, and if you're too protective, so actually, I think it's kind of good on some things, but bad on others. So I have no solution. I'm giving it to you. And you know, I think within what you said there around sort of giving your children freedom as they grow, you know, one of the things that can be really impactful is trust and helping your child to develop the skill of being trustworthy. And, you know, with this sweet situation, there's a really nice piece of research, which is about children over the age of 10 respond really, really well to being given status and respect. So with something like sweets, rather than sort of telling them, you know, you shouldn't eat sweets, they're bad for your teeth, it goes down, you know, it doesn't go down well, right? But if you give children information, right, and you say, you know, this is what could happen to your teeth if you eat a lot of sweets. What do you think would be the best course of action here? When you're honoring their status and respect, when you are helping them to be wise, giving them the opportunity to think and be wise so that they're not feeling controlled by you in making the decision, but they're instead empowered. Are feeling internally empowered. That's really where we can move forward from petty disputes about things like sweets and actually start your child thinking about what might be the best course of action, which is a long process, which will take many, many years. It's no quick fix. But I think this is why we need to be seeing parenting as this very long journey. Oh, I've just been taken back to a memory when I was a teenager in school, primary school. There was an option to watch this thing about drugs, you know. They gave the option to the parents, and my mum was like, "You're definitely going to go watch this." I was like, "Oh no." But it was a horrible, I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't do it in British schools here, but basically they showed us this video of what happens when you take drugs. Like literally, these people agree to be filmed, and then you're there watching, and you're 12, and you're seeing this, and it was the worst thing ever. It had such an emotional, horribly awful effect on me that I do not want anything to do with drugs. Don't want it. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that at all. And it worked. I mean, they don't do that in schools now, but that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah. Show them.
Rather than just an adult coming in.
The bad teeth.
Yeah. Rather than an adult just coming in and saying, don't do this. Yeah. Well, the child's brain is, particularly in the teenage years, the child's brain is actually primed to be like risk and rebellion. The child is like more primed for that than they are for like listening.
Why are they like that?
Because they need to individuate from their parents, and this is a healthy process, but it can be done in a way that honors the teenager's sovereignty, right, rather than taking away and kind of like squashing the teenager. I think it's really interesting to look at how other cultures raise teenagers.
Okay.
And the happiest teenagers in the world are apparently in the Netherlands.
Are they?
Yeah. And
gosh.
This is apparently they have like just a very respectful culture with their teenagers. And there's also a great deal of listening as well within that culture towards teenagers. And the kind of more traditional approach where we might be lecturing a teenager, which goes down like a ton of bricks, right, doesn't work. Yeah. That's less of a thing, apparently.
Yeah, on the freedom thing as well, because as they become older, phones are a thing, aren't they? And apps on the phone and everything like that. And my husband... well, we're both in marketing, and he specializes in digital marketing. He knows everything about these apps and whatever. And the age of when they should have phones and everything. And I was like, pushing back and going, look, we just want to leave that as late as possible. Don't pollute their brains. I don't want them having all this radiation and, the typical things. And we need to monitor. And he was like, look, just don't, because if you monitor too much and you start to take it away, they're going to want it more. And then you won't know what they're doing on the apps because they will have them. And he was spot on, because I saw this happening with basically all of the kids. Yeah. And I know this for a fact, that were prohibited these apps and their phones taken away. They all had secret accounts anyway, and they were all on other devices and using other mechanisms to access these accounts. And this was all done behind the parents' back because they couldn't trust the parent to allow them to have the technology. And I'm really glad that I was going to go down that ultra strict route for as long as I possibly could. And it's only thanks to my husband that I didn't, and I'm grateful for it. He was right. Because actually giving them that and access to it, and then just explaining it to them. And he did a lot of training them on how the apps work and how they're going to send you information. If you watch something once, it's going to go into a program. Yeah. He explained it to them and even made them do some work on it, for them to run a campaign and then see how that's fed back to them. So he's even got them learning about digital marketing, but that actually helped them. Yeah. And then when it came to my daughter and her study, she goes, I'm switching off TikTok. I'm totally deleting it for the whole of my exam period, because it's having an effect on me, and I'm getting too addicted. So I'm going to switch it off myself. She did it herself. I had nothing to do with it. So in that way, the lack of freedom, the giving freedom and not prohibiting them, that was useful for the teenagers. Weirdly, where you think the opposite, teenagers need to be more controlled. It's instinct to control them, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think with technology in general, I think that parents do a disservice to themselves and to their kids if they don't ask this crucial question. Are the phones serving the family? Because technology is here to serve us. And if it is costing us more than it is serving us, and it might be costing us if the child is doing these sneaky behaviors, behind the parent's back. That's the question we really need to come back to. And I love the example you used there, because it sounded like your husband was doing the thing that I really think teenagers need, which is media literacy and critical thinking skills. Because media literacy, the ability to look at the content and critically analyze it and question it, and not to take it at face value, but be curious and ask, what is this video normalizing, and is that normal?
Yeah.
It's emotional intelligence again, critical thinking. That's what is going to protect your child.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it when they come to you with it and they're like, look what they're showing now. And the things, if something bothers them, because they're allowed it, they'll actually show, and I'll be, oh no, that's that thing where it will burn your body if you do this. Because this is, there's some borax, things like, sometimes they have these challenges that they want kids to do, but that are very dangerous. And they'll show it, oh look, this is going around again. Or what do you think about this? You're like, oh my word, what's that? That's going around. But otherwise, you would never have that intel if you didn't have that trust. And it is intel. But I think it's different with parenting smaller kids where you can't. If you gave them that phone, they'd be gone. You'd never see them again.
Yeah. And I think, in that sense...
it's probably different, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, a technology like phones, screens, it's like a donut, right? A donut is nice. It's, sweet. But you wouldn't let your child have 20 donuts because then that would not be healthy. It's exactly the same. We don't want to deny our child the donut every time, but also you wouldn't give them 20 donuts. And I think it goes back to the boundaries. It's like having boundaries, but also with teenagers, like respecting the child within the boundary. And really, the best kind of boundaries that work with teenagers are the ones where the child feels respected within the boundary and where the child has some buy-in with the boundary. So where the child understands that, this boundary's here to help me develop healthy habits. This boundary's here to help me get the values of the family. Right? This boundary is here to keep me safe. This boundary is not here to control me or squelch me. This boundary is here to give me skills for the future.
Yeah, and so let's talk about, because we spoke about the community.
Yeah.
So we've got this nuclear family, and yes, most of us, we're in this nuclear family. We don't have the privilege of having all the grandparents, everyone. Some of us, they're living abroad, and there's all that kind of situation. Or different cities, towns, it's quite difficult. But then you've got the other influences. So you've got the nearby kids, and the kids in the school, and then, or your university or whatever it is, nursery school. And nursery schools have different ways of looking after kids. It's so different. We go to one than the other, the parenting style, the upbringing style, whatever you want to call it. I mean, the famous case of Molly May recently with the toddlers biting each other in the nursery school. And of course, toddlers are allowed to, they are allowed to do things like that because they're toddlers. But then, of course, the nursery school will put mechanisms in place, hopefully, to prevent that. And some nurseries might be doing it differently to other nurseries. But there are these other influences, and you let your child go and it goes into these spaces. And how do you know? How do you even choose a place? And sometimes you might not even be able to. You're just living in a neighborhood that's maybe not the greatest, and then your kid is in the school, and then it gets really influenced. So you have to you double up on parenting, or how do you even navigate this?
It's hard, and again, we live in a non-optimal society. But I think one of the most important things to remember is that whatever the outside influence, you should be the primary source of influence for your child. And how you do that is by doubling down on belonging. So your home needs to be a deep place of belonging for your child. Okay. And if the child feels that they deeply belong in the family, everything else is slightly less important. And, in our culture...
that. Belonging.
Yeah. And belonging is the opposite of shame. So if you want to raise confident kids who are secure in themselves, we double down on belonging. And really within this is also like an attachment piece. So if we think of Daniel Siegel's 4 S's of attachment, the child needs to be safe at home. So that's emotionally safe. So they're going to do an emotion and the parent is going to hold them through that emotion. Not try to fix it or squelch it, but your emotions are valid, right? And obviously physically safe.
They are valid, aren't they? They are valid.
The child needs to be seen. And by that means you need to listen to your child more than you go in to fix, more than you go in to give advice. Listening to your child so that they feel deeply understood. Because if a child feels deeply understood at home, they are able to weather the storms of being not understood in other environments if they feel deeply understood at home. Soothed is the next S. And that really the world would be a much, much better place if everybody was more soothed. And so often as parents, that
not
is
inflamed.
Yes, exactly. So often as parents, that's what we're needing, is to feel more soothed. And then basically, if you do those three things repeatedly over time, that creates the fourth S, which is a secure attachment. And a secure attachment, it transcends all time and space throughout the child's life, because a child, if they're securely attached to their caregivers at home, it's like giving the child a protective force field. So they can go into situations where people don't understand them, or maybe, it's not the ideal situation, and they can know I have inherent worth.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's powerful. There's also something that I was thinking about, and I do think about a lot throughout parenting, but I saw it yesterday. I went to the park and there was a granddad and a little toddler.
Yeah.
They'd only sort of got there, and they were talking and and the little kid was playing really nicely on the swings, going up and down, having a wonderful time. And then just soon after that, not many minutes went by, and then the grandfather was like, come on, we need to go back now. We need to go back now. And the little kid didn't want to. And it was like, no, come on. And actually, I felt really sorry for the kid, because obviously, yes, his mummy's home. And you think, so what? So what that she's home? Give the kid a break. It's probably been trapped, in some nursery or whatever. It's finally outside. What a lovely, it was just before sunset. It was really, and just lovely to be out there. And you felt for the child. And I was like with the kid. And the kid started getting frustrated with his grandpa, who was now insisting, oh, come on now, we need to go. And and the kid was protesting. But it was right, I think. Like, I know, I'm sure they had their reasons, and you can rationalize as an adult. But what if the kid is right?
Yeah. And I think what you point to there is the child's primary need is for play. Second, also attachment. Play and
telling
attachment.
Him that.
Yeah. And really, what we live in a society that's quite prejudiced against children. As in, we deem the adult to be more important than the child. And you see this in like all aspects of life. But really, when we question that for a moment and we say, well, why are we so prejudiced against the child? The child is a human. They are just a less developed human. Now, that doesn't mean we put the child's needs above all else, but it does mean we might have empathy for the child whilst we set the boundary. That we kind of see their needs, that we see their pain. Doesn't mean that we always have to bend to that and accommodate it, but we can be kind as we go through and progress and set boundaries, because the child is a person. And if we kind of respect their personhood whilst we parent, then it's easier for them and it's easier for us. So setting boundaries, but doing so with kindness, love, and empathy. It's like strength and softness both together. And if we're too soft and we're too strong, it's really finding that middle ground that is the way through we become great leaders.
You speak a lot about belonging and this connection.
Yeah.
And what it seems to me that you're saying is you want to, I suppose it makes sense, you want to stay close to your child and to understand them, what they want, what's right for them, to be empathetic to their needs. It's not all about you and your job and where you need to go, but it's also about them and them being outside. And it's like, it's giving that time and that sensitivity to to their experience and their world, and just sort of, for it to not to be more about them, I think. It sounds like.
I think, the child is a member of the community. So the child is important. The parent is also important. And it's, the family unit is important. And the world should not revolve around the child, but the world should also not revolve around the parent. It's you are a collective of people. And when we respect each other's needs within the community, doesn't mean we always have to be able to meet the need, but when we respect the need, that's where we find more peace in our families.
Okay, so to bring up a child to an adult that's a resilient adult, that can survive in today's hectic world. How do we do that? Because a lot of the time with the schools, the conditioning is to always be a people pleaser, teacher pleaser. Yes, please. No, thank you. Sit there, be quiet, don't have an opinion. There is a bit of that. And sometimes kids are a bit boxed in and they have to just be very goody two shoes or they won't do well in the school. But then again, you also don't want, of course, it depends on the school, but some will run riot and then, they've got no boundaries or whatever, and then they grow up like that. But how do we allow them to be, ones that have the opinions and that are risk takers, but also obedient in a way when they need to be,
This is the great
simplest term.
This is the great challenge. And, I always think people pleasing is not a helpful term. People pleasing is self-abandonment. It is denying your own needs in order to prioritize somebody else's needs.
Okay,
like
teacher pleasing then. Teacher pleasing. Let's put controversially. Teacher pleasing. The teacher said, shush, be quiet, don't talk, don't do this, don't do that. And you have to be quiet because the lesson has to go on. But what if your opinion is valid or that?
Yeah. I think one of the things about school, and I was a secondary school teacher for 10 years. And one of the things about school that I think is very helpful to think about is that it's a game. And if we teach our kids that school is a game and we play the game well, we get good outcomes, right? Where we really and truly belong is at home, and that's where we derive our inherent worth from. Right?
Gosh.
And, school is a game that we play. And it's kind of like respecting that school has these rules and that sometimes we may not get our needs met at school, right? Our need to be heard may not be met. Our need for freedom may not be met. And really, this is where we can honor those needs in the times out of school. So, and really tuning into what are your child's unique, most prevalent needs. So, for example, one of my kids has a high need for freedom. And he comes home from school and he says, I've just been told what to do all day. Right?
Yeah. And so can feel like that for them.
Yeah. And so to give him some space in the time after school where he is allowed to be free. And I find he's so much more cooperative with me if I'm able to give him that space. If your child, has a strong need to be heard and they do not get that need met at school, then you need to be meeting that need perhaps by creating times when you listen to them. And then when there's a pause in the listening, you ask them, is there anything more? Tell me some more about that. And you give them more of an opportunity to be heard. And you highlight to the child the needs that they're not getting met at school so that they can understand why they find it hard at school. Because really all we are as humans is a bag of feelings and needs. And feelings and needs drive all of our behavior. So the more you can empathize with your child's feelings and needs and help them understand their own feelings and needs, the more we're creating children who can go through life and become resilient because they know themselves.
And on the subject of resilience, and parents will definitely be watching and having a similar experience and wanting to know more about it. Is it okay for the parent to sometimes step in? So if there's a bully, every school has a rogue bully. Every school has someone that's annoying. We'll call them a kid that's maybe a bit, and also the parents of the kid also being quite, always getting involved and like just being. So when is it okay as a parent to also step in and come in and sort of save your child, but like, you know, stand with them, and when is it not okay and let them sort of go through it? I think to be resilient.
Yeah, I think this speaks to something a little bit deeper, which is about the difference between being in a fixing energy to being in a holding space energy. So when you're in a fixing energy, everything feels like an emergency. Everything feels very urgent. We need to go in. We need to fix. We need to sort this out now.
It's on.
It's on. And so many parents are in that fixing energy because no one in their life has ever held space for them.
Right.
A holding space energy is much slower, more trusting, more grounded. It trusts that with space, time, guidance and support, that the child will be able to solve their own problems. That doesn't mean we leave them alone, because of course sometimes it's right for you to step in. Of course it is. But we do so with a slower pace, not with urgency and emergency, but with a more trusting pace. And one of the greatest things I think we can teach our children is about boundaries, their own boundaries. So obviously we've spoken about boundaries in the context of sort of like rules and guidelines, but there's another way of looking at boundaries, which is how they protect their energy, those kind of emotional.
They need to protect their energy, because kids can be mean to each other, like we know.
Yeah.
Kids can get out of control.
Yeah. And a kid with weak boundaries is like an open target for bullies. But a kid who understands their boundaries, who knows their worth, who knows that they belong, who has a stronger boundary, they're less of a target for bullies, because when a bully tries to take their energy, the child protects their energy.
Yeah, and they need those lessons. You know, they need the bullies and the rogue ones and the strange ones and these ones and the ones that don't talk and the ones that talk too much, because that's going to be life.
Yeah.
So if they don't practice now, not everything's rosy.
Yeah.
Please do encounter a bully and a weird one and a whatever, a wacky type and one that you don't understand, and the nice ones, and encounter them all, because that's going to be the kaleidoscope of
and added to this is one of the most important things you can do as a parent is give your child a healthy set of beliefs. Because if your child has a great set of beliefs, things like, I am inherently good enough, I am worthy of love and belonging, I'm a good person, I can handle things, I am capable. If your child has those beliefs, then they can go through the schooling system, they can experience times when things are tough, and they will be able to thrive and overcome. And so often parents get it wrong in that their role, they think, is to sort of like double down on academics, make my child like great at like 10 different, they can play piano, they can swim, but do they have a good set of beliefs? And sometimes those activities, you know, swimming or whatever it might be, can aid those beliefs. But sometimes if a child is so busy, they don't get the space to develop those beliefs and the kind of guidance, and they're being held in order to grow those beliefs.
I think we've just done a full 360 and we've come back to the very first question, which was the parents. When I said the most popular, most asked question about parenting is, am I a good parent? And you said, it's, am I a capable parent? And it's the belief that you are. And then getting the skills, whether it's a coach, someone to help you, someone to speak to sharpen those skills, because we're all works in progress. I always say it on this show. We're all work in progress. And whatever way you can improve and be better, do it, because we can all be better. All of us. But am I capable? Am I a good parent? Yes, you are, and you can do it. It's been wonderful having you on.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you.